This video will be covering key concepts in the IB biology topic of water. We'll take a look at the molecular structure of water, then discuss how this impacts its solvent ability and physical properties. These give rise to its use as an aquatic habitat and the processes of cohesion and adhesion, which lead to capillary action. At the end of this video, you should be able to draw a molecule of water and explain how it contributes to biological processes. To understand why water is such an important molecule for life, we first need to understand its molecular structure. A water molecule is composed of two hydrogen atoms, each covalently bonded to the oxygen atom. A covalent bond is a type of bond formed when atoms share electrons. Here, the oxygen and hydrogens share their electrons within the molecule. Because oxygen is more electronegative than hydrogen, oxygen pulls the shared electrons in these covalent bonds closer to itself. This unequal distribution of electrons results in the oxygen atom having a partial negative charge, while the hydrogen atoms acquire partial positive charges. We represent this with this Greek lowercase delta symbol here. Additionally, the water molecule has a bent shape with an angle of approximately 105 degrees between the hydrogen-oxygen-hydrogen bonds. This bent shape, combined with the uneven electron distribution, creates an overall dipole moment in the molecule, making it polar. Since water is polar, water molecules are attracted to each other through the force of hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonds form between a negative oxygen atom of one water molecule and a positive hydrogen atom of another molecule. Hydrogen bonds are strong intermolecular forces and help us understand how water behaves. It gives water its unique properties, such as its high boiling point and its role as a versatile solvent. One of the important properties of water emerging from this polar structure is this solvent ability. Because water is polar, other polar molecules are attracted to it. So, hydrophilic substances can dissolve in water, as they form hydrogen bonds with the water molecules. This gives water a very powerful solvent ability. This ability is one of the reasons why water is such a useful medium for life. While the mechanism for the origin of the first cells is unclear, it occurred 3.8 billion years ago, at a time when most of the Earth's surface was covered in primordial oceans. In these oceans, critical compounds came together to form polymers needed to build cells. Water was the perfect medium for this, because the enzymes required to catalyze these reactions function in aqueous environments, and the molecules can move freely in water to collide with one another and start the reactions. We still see this in modern-day cells. The cytosol is the fluid encased by the cell membrane. It's composed of around 70% water and is the site of most chemical reactions conducted by the cell. However, this solvent ability is complemented by the fact that hydrophobic substances cannot dissolve into water. Instead, they repel water, giving rise to new properties. For instance, lipids are hydrophobic and insoluble. Cholesterol is an example of a key lipid that's required for cells, as it affects the fluidity of the membrane. Because of its insolubility, it can be embedded into the equally hydrophobic core of the plasma membrane, instead of being repelled. However, when it comes to transport, cholesterol needs to be packaged into lipoproteins, like LDL and HDL cholesterols. As a hydrophobic molecule, it won't dissolve into blood. The main component of blood is plasma, which is about 90% water, meaning that it can dissolve hydrophilic molecules for transport, but requires hydrophobic molecules to be repackaged into a hydrophilic container. Water has physical properties too. Aquatic habitats like marine environments benefit from several of these physical properties. Let's take, for example, the habitat of the Arctic Sea. The ringed seal lives within the water, whereas the black-throated loon lives in the coastal environment. 4 physical properties of water that impact this habitat are its specific heat capacity, thermal conductivity, buoyancy, and viscosity. The specific heat capacity of a substance is the amount of heat required to change the temperature of a substance by 1 degree Celsius. The practical effect this has is that it reflects the amount of energy a substance can absorb. Water, for example, has a high specific heat capacity. It can absorb a significant amount of heat from the surrounding environment, then release it slowly as the environmental temperature decreases. The ability to absorb and release heat is a very useful property to marine environments. Over the warmer summer months, heat from the sun and air is absorbed by the ocean, stored in the water by breaking the hydrogen bonds that hold it together. Then, as the temperature cools in the winter, the hydrogen bonds reform slowly and release that energy and heat over time. This coolant property allows bodies of water to create warmer microclimates as it buffers the surrounding area from the cold, allowing the ringed seal and black-throated loon to live comfortably. Thermal conductivity is similar to specific heat capacity in that it's one of the thermal properties of water. However, thermal conductivity is the ability of a substance to conduct or transfer heat. Relative to air, water also has a high thermal conductivity. In water, the strong hydrogen bonding network facilitates rapid energy transfer, leading to higher thermal conductivity. Heat transfers into and out of water quickly, so as a warm-blooded mammal, the ringed seal needs to insulate itself well against heat loss while swimming, resulting in its thick layer of blubber. Air is primarily composed of non-polar molecules like nitrogen and oxygen, which have weaker intermolecular forces. Heat transfer in air occurs through collisions between relatively few and weakly interacting gas molecules, resulting in lower thermal conductivity. The black-throated loon, living predominantly in the land and air, does not lose as much heat to its environment relative to a seal living in water. Buoyancy is the upward force exerted by a fluid, which acts against the downward force of gravity. Buoyancy is determined by the density of a medium. Water is more dense than air, so this upward force allows objects and organisms to float in the ocean. This uplifting force therefore allows the ringed seal to swim more easily and spend less energy on keeping itself afloat. Alternately, air has no buoyancy, so in order for the loon to move, it needs to power its own lift force, such that it's higher than gravitational force. This takes more effort and energy. Furthermore, the seal swimming is more efficient because of water's viscosity. This is the resistance a liquid has to flow. As a liquid, water is viscous, where air is not. So it provides resistance when the ringed seal's flippers push against it, propelling the seal forward. When the loon uses its webbed feet to swim, it uses the same viscosity to its advantage. Relative to other liquids, however, water has a low viscosity, which means significant energy is not needed for organisms to move through water. When we talked about water's molecular structure, we discussed how hydrogen bonds form between the positive hydrogen atoms and the negative oxygen atoms of two different molecules. This results in polar molecules having forces of attraction, giving rise to a phenomenon called cohesion. Cohesion occurs when molecules of the same polar substance are attracted to one another. As a consequence, because water molecules link using hydrogen bonds, surface tension occurs. Surface tension is the elasticity of a liquid surface. It can resist external forces, like a light insect moving across it, or a paperclip being rested on top, because of this elasticity. See, these hydrogen bonds contain energy. This energy is what produces the cohesive effect, because it takes a greater amount of energy in order to break the bonds and separate the water molecules, disrupting the surface of the water. So, if this insect distributes its small weight equally over the surface of the water, it can move across without breaking the bonds. This creates a thriving habitat on water surfaces, composed of insects, algae, frog eggs, water spiders, and many other organisms. Another force observable in polar molecules is adhesion, where cohesion occurs when two molecules of the same substance are attracted to one another. Adhesion occurs when molecules of different substances form bonds. This attraction can be greater than, equal to, or less than the cohesive force. Adhesion also plays an important role in biological processes. For example, adhesion occurs in the xylem of plants. Xylem are a type of vascular tissue, long, thin tubes that extend all the way from the roots, up through the stem, and into the leaves. Xylem transport water that has been absorbed from the soil into the roots, and adhesion is key to this process. See, the walls of the xylem are plant cell walls, composed primarily of cellulose. Cellulose has a number of hydroxyl groups that readily form hydrogen bonds with water molecules, and this attraction causes water to stick to the walls of the xylem. In other words, cellulose is hydrophilic, or attracted to water. So, even though water is moving up the xylem against gravity, this adhesion helps prevent it from falling down. This force of adhesion is complemented by cohesive forces as well, resulting in a phenomenon called capillary action. Capillary action is when a liquid like water moves upwards in a thin tube against the force of gravity. We've explained how adhesion between water molecules and the xylem walls contributes to this process, but cohesion also plays a role. Because the water molecules are attracted to each other, when one molecule is pulled upwards, the next molecule will follow, and so on. This is often called the beads on a string model, because the negative pressure at the top of the xylem caused by evaporation pulls the water molecules up, just like beads on a string. You can see this occurring here. Adhesion causes the water molecules to stick to the xylem walls, before cohesion causes them to follow each other, eventually sticking to the wall higher up the tube. This repeats until the water exits the xylem into the leaves, where it evaporates through pores called stomata and moves out into the atmosphere. This is also called the cohesion tension theory, and it's the mechanism behind transpiration in plants. Capillary action in soil is a critical process also influenced by the adhesive properties of water. In the context of soil, adhesion refers to the attraction between water molecules and the surfaces of soil particles. Soil particles, which can be composed of sand, silt, clay and organic matter, have various surface properties that can attract and hold water molecules. The adhesive forces between the water molecules and the soil particles are responsible for the initial wetting of the soil. Another way to describe capillary action is the movement of water within the spaces of a porous material due to the forces of adhesion, cohesion, and surface tension. When water is present in the soil, it moves through the tiny spaces between soil particles due to these forces. We can think of these spaces as capillaries, like the tubes of the xylem. Adhesion causes the water to cling to the soil particles, while cohesion helps pull more water molecules along with it. The finer the soil particles, the smaller the capillary spaces, which enhances capillary action. Surface tension contributes to the soil's ability to retain water by holding it in the pore spaces against the force of gravity. This combination of processes allows water to move upward against gravity in the soil, ensuring that water can reach plant roots even when the water table is lower than the root zone. This maintains the soil moisture, which is vital for seed germination, root development, plant hydration, and nutrient uptake. In this video, we learnt that water is a polar molecule that can form hydrogen bonds with other polar molecules. This gives water powerful hydrophilic solvent abilities, so aqueous substances can conduct many reactions. We talked about this in the context of the cytosol in cells. Water has a high specific heat capacity, buoyancy, viscosity, and thermal conductivity, making it an ideal habitat for marine organisms. Two examples of these organisms are the ringed seal and black-throated loon. Since water can form hydrogen bonds with itself, this gives it cohesive properties, as the water molecules are attracted to each other, causing surface tension. Water also displays adhesion, where it's attracted to solid substances. This cohesion and adhesion gives rise to capillary action, where water will move upwards against gravity in a thin tube. This is seen in plant xylem and in soil. Together, these attributes make water a fundamental and dynamic component of both biological systems and the natural environment.